We've been very fortunate to have Marc not only as our lead sponsor of this conference for the past now 4 years, but to also lead some sessions for us. They're always very well received and well done, and we're thrilled to have him back for this year's conference. So, as many of you know, ADVI is based here in DC. It advises healthcare companies on reimbursement policy, and for more than 25 years, Marc has helped create solutions affecting the thorniest public and private sector reimbursement issues across Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial insurance. He is a Texan through and through, and prior to starting ADVI, he served as Chief of Staff to the Commissioner of the Texas Health and Human Service Commission. He was a policy advisor to then Governor George W. Bush, and he also served in the White House Office of Policy Development and on the President's Council on Competitiveness under President H.W. Bush. So Marc has put together a terrific panel to discuss issues that are certainly on the minds of all of us these days. So Marc, welcome, your panel.
Thank you for getting policy. Kate said I get the fortunate job of being able to curate and moderate really good panels with really good friends and colleagues. And we have another one of those for you today. Given a lot of the conversation that you heard this morning, a lot of what you've read in the paper and what you've been doing at work for the past several months, there is an impact on manufacturers, providers, and patients of President Trump's policies. And cancer care is the perfect model for discussing that and what the impact of government policy is on how care is delivered. Advances in cancer have been incredible, but at a cost. Cancer care has a unique delivery model. It's both community and hospital, as folks know. There are side of service implications in terms of service delivery, as well as the cost differential. The delivery system is extremely complex and fragile. Oncologists are engaged, and cancer patients and patient groups are very engaged. Today we have a terrific panel to talk to you about those issues, to talk to you about some of the policies that we just heard about over lunch. So without further ado, I want to introduce the panel. Randy Burkholder is the Vice President of Policy from the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. Mike Kolodziej, who is now one of my colleagues, but in the past was the chair of the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee at U.S. Oncology and the Chief Medical Officer for Oncology for ADVI. Debra Patt, who is the Executive Vice President for Policy and Strategy with Texas Oncology, and is also a practicing oncologist in Austin, Texas. Jeff Allen, you've heard from earlier today, but President and CEO of Friends of Cancer Research. And Jacqueline Zummo, who's the last name I can't remember, who is Senior Director of Corporate Affairs for Lilly in Oncology. And without further ado, let me just jump in and talk a little bit, first with Jeff and with Debra. Talk a little bit to the audience about how cancer care is delivered today. Do patients like it? What don't they like about it? And how about doctors? What do they like or dislike? Just to set the stage for our discussion.
Well, I guess it's fair to say if patients like their care or not, we probably would not be here if the status quo were favorable to all parties, including those that are receiving the care. So I think on one hand, adding to the complexity of the situation, we see rapid advancements, as mentioned by some of our earlier panelists today, about the pace at which new medicine is being discovered and approved, specifically in the case of cancer. And while that's not across the board, there are certainly some types of cancer which that similar advancement has not been seen. But generally, there has been remarkable progress. I think where the challenge is starting to sort of come to bear is that a approval by the FDA regulatory system isn't automatically translating into accessible, equitable, affordable medicine, and that is causing further friction friction in the actual implementation and availability of care. Obviously it's a very complex system. It's quite fragmented. Patient's journey may be highly variable in terms of where they're diagnosed, how they're diagnosed, where they're seen for the duration of their care and the modalities that are used. And with all that being said, we are seeing an escalation in price for all of these interventions. And that's starting to raise question in terms of better ways to sort of assign value to those interventions as well. So it's causing a great deal of tension, I think, to the system of cancer care that in many ways, hopefully, can be begun to be sorted out.
Great. Deb, how are you?
So, echoing a little bit what Jeff had said, we see unprecedented progress in cancer care. So I like to use as sort of an opportunity analog that being an oncologist today is like being an infectious disease specialist in the 1930s. I do feel like we're in a time of remarkable innovation and we have a lot of new drugs. I finished my fellowship from ADVI in 2006, and then we had mostly chemotherapy and a little targeted therapy and very minimal immunotherapy. Now we have a lot of more chemo, a lot of targeted therapy, a lot of immunotherapy, combinations within. We have subspecialties of diseases. So maybe we treated generically 3 types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now we have 60 types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And now we treat different treatment conditions. And really the paradigm of cancer care has shifted to many patients benefit from long-term treatment like a chronic disease, like hypertension or diabetes. So patients are excited about that because, as a breast cancer specialist, I have patients that 10 years ago with metastatic breast cancer to their brain would have had an average survival of 6 weeks who are alive and well today. I have dozens of these patients. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they are teachers, they're active in their lives. And so that's exciting. And patients are excited about that, and I'm excited about that. Probably everyone in this room is excited about that. But the challenge is the escalated cost and how to manage that increasing financial toxicity. What I'll say is that's borne variably between patients because some patients have very good commercial insurance or co-insurance products that minimize their financial toxicity, though it's still there. And other patients that bear a greater burden of financial toxicity, and that becomes a real challenge. So I think it's exciting for patients, but that's obviously a problem that we need to manage better. From the doctor's perspective, there are challenges in our new environment. Administrative burden has become more challenging. We spend a lot of time not just spending time with patients making decisions about care, but around documentation. And we are participating in a lot of innovation. So my practice, which is a large practice in Texas, we not only participate in 2 commercial alternative payment model pilots, but also are a large participant in the oncology care model pilot out of CMMI. And so that the oncology care model pilot has been a lot of time and investment in infrastructure resources. And that's more that we have to manage participating in those as we try to walk the walk from volume to value-based care. So those are challenges that we have today.
Great. Jeff, let me come back to you a little bit. From what you hear, from what you see, not only in your group, but other advocacy organizations, and how do patients experience this financial toxicity? Is it real to them? What are you hearing, and how do you deal with it? And then I'll ask the same thing from Randy and Pat.
Yeah, I think it's very real. I think that the organizations that we've worked with that provide those types of assistance services, their volume continues to go up in terms of people that they have inquiring for help or seeking help. Even an organization like ours that doesn't have one of those exact assistance programs, we still get calls from individuals that clearly are grasping for straws, sort of just seeking for any direction in terms of point me in the right direction for help. And I think that speaks to the magnitude, of the problem, one, but also the lack of clarity in terms of what to do. And I think that adds to the obvious fearfulness of cancer diagnosis.
Great. Randy, what do you think? You look at this issue from a little bit different perspective.
Sure. Well, I completely agree. That's an incredibly important issue to make sure we're addressing that mention that one of the things that really matters to patients and providers is the incredible advances that we are starting to see and that we are on the cusp of making even more of. And I guess setting the context for financial hardship, I think that's the right problem to have, is figuring out how do we effectively evolve the system so that we are providing sustainable financing and affordable access to those breakthroughs, but while we're also sustaining continued progress for those patients with unmet needs, and that's a balance. That is a balance that's incredibly important for us to maintain. On the issue of financial hardship, I think from our vantage point, number one is we don't think any patient with a diagnosis of cancer, or certainly any other serious or life-threatening disease for that matter, should have to worry about whether they can afford the care they need. So we think we really need to be focused on solutions that are holistic, where we are all playing our part to make sure that we're meeting patients where they're at that incredibly difficult time, in an incredibly difficult care journey. But I think when you think about tackling the problem, we need to really start with the data and what are we seeing is driving that problem. So I think some of the survey work that's been done shows there's a wide range of both medical and non-medical costs that contribute to patients' financial toxicity. For example, the top three are medical, and some of the surveys I've seen involve, I think, Debbie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like physician co-pays is one, prescription drug costs is the second, diagnostics and diagnostic imaging is third, and then on the non-medical side you see things like gas and transportation, food, housing, those sorts of things. So I think it's really important to recognize that the challenge is holistic and our solutions have to be holistic. And the final point I will make, because I think it's one that is too often ignored, I will skip over the reality that in insurance design and by extension employment status, which often changes for people with cancer, play a really big role in the kind of financial hardship they experience. That has to be part of the solution. The other thing that we have to recognize, and this was brought to light, really brought to the forefront of my mind by the Times article on this topic today, is the fact that there is growing financial toxicity that is being driven by hospital consolidation. Patients are experiencing higher costs because they're being shifted increasingly to higher cost sites of care and facing higher prices and facing higher co-pays on medicines when they're in a commercial plan, and they're paying a co-payment on a drug price that's been marked up 500 or 600 or 700%. So we need to look at that aspect, and it's a growing aspect of the challenge of financial hardship as well.
I'll just add a quick point. So I'm glad that we're all in agreement that financial toxicity is in fact a very real thing. And when we get down to talking to individual patients and their families about what their medical bills need for the changes in their lifestyle, it wouldn't matter if it was 1,000, 100,000, or a million patients. It's very real for one patient and their circumstances. But what I would warn against is us generalizing what that means across cancer populations or other areas of specialty care. And I think as manufacturers, we do have a responsibility to bring clarity to the system about where that financial toxicity is more present than in other areas. So as an example, we all know that if you don't have supplemental coverage in Medicare, you're facing 20% co-insurance rates for your care and your drug treatments. But if you actually look at the Medicare Advantage plans, and the most recent data that I'm confident in comes back from 2016, but 66% of those patients are also paying 20% co-insurance. So there are sectors based off of insurance design and coverage policy of the patients that we're trying to serve that in fact do need greater affordability solutions, whereas certain other areas don't. Eli Lilly and Company, at least in our cancer division, publishes papers on what the average patients pay for all of our commercialized products, and you can go look at those. We publish those in health affairs and other journals, and the majority of our patients, which I believe is similar for many manufacturers in the room, are paying $0. So that does not mean that we don't believe in financial toxicity. It does not mean that we aren't working collaboratively to come up with patient affordability solutions. But those solutions are in certain areas and certain pockets of patient populations where the need is very great.
Great. Let me go back to Deb and ask, from your practice perspective, how often do patients walk away from therapy because of the cost of drugs? How do you see that? How does it manifest?
It's a great question. So I'll say it is variable based on a patient situation, but it does happen. The patient sometimes will walk away from various therapies because the cost is just too much for them to bear. And I think that the healthcare spectrum is complex, and we all bear some burden in how we contribute to the solution. Some of the ways that my practice works to contribute to the solution is we have all of our patients meet with a financial counselor prior to initiation of treatment, so they really understand what their out-of-pocket cost is, and we can identify opportunities to apply for assistance programs or to get them engaged with a social worker to understand complementary ways in which they can be helped with the financial toxicity of their care. So that, from an individual perspective, I think is really helpful, is obviously the first thing that crosses a patient's mind when they have a cancer diagnosis isn't how they'll pay for it, but that's a really important question later. And then the other thing that I think is important for practice is the engagement in value-based care models, to try to think about, how you can facilitate high-value decision-making and lower the overall burden of care, whether it's using decision support and pathways, or just engaging in comprehensive models to stratify risk and assist patients appropriately. So there's a lot we can do. But I do see patients walk away. So as a breast cancer specialist, I've seen patients decline more effective therapy because the out-of-pocket cost was too high for them. And I think that we see that more in patients on the traditional Medicare product that have a higher out-of-pocket expense than you do in patients with commercial insurance or co-insurance that helps them, once they meet a deductible, helps with some of those out-of-pocket costs.
Really quick, Mark, and just I would wholeheartedly agree, but partly just because I've been surprised to see that happens as much as it does in a therapeutic area or disease like cancer, where and I think part of what is driving that is insurance design and formularies that are effectively punishing people for their diagnosis or punishing people for their biology. When you see, for example, 50% of all plans at the silver level in the healthcare exchanges and individual market are putting all cancer anti-angiogenesis treatments in the very highest cost sharing tier. You're making it tough on patients for reasons that don't have anything to do with their clinical need. And the thing that has really surprised me is the real impact that has on treatment abandonment. And Joel Negotiated did some research a year or two back looking at that and found that patients on oral oncolytics who are in the highest cost sharing category are 5 times as likely to abandon treatment as cancer patients in the lowest cost sharing category. And these aren't patients who are taking their medicines for convenience purposes. They're taking it because they're fighting life-threatening disease.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and Deb and Mike too. Do you see that in practice? The difference in between oral and IV injected drugs?
Yes. So I'll say that in the Part B space, I think that cost sharing obligation tends to be higher, at least initially. And that is a burden. And actually, there have been studies looking at compliance, to your point, based on higher cost drugs, and that is a limitation to appropriate compliance with any therapy is the out-of-pocket costs.
Great.
So, you know what? I feel like I have to defend the insurance companies. But even though I don't work for them, and I'm not going to debate benefit design, but I think the fact of the matter is that when I was in practice and I had a colon cancer patient and we had to choose between infused 5-FU and capecitabine, not picking on any specific manufacturer, the patient chose infused 5-FU. And they did that because their out-of-pocket was substantially low. And that kind of decision, which is very, very hard to capture in any study, actually happens fairly often. Right? It happens actually in Medicare, and it happens in commercial insurance, and it happens in everything else. And patients, when faced with a choice of feeding their family or choosing a more convenient but equally effective therapy, they'll feed their family. And you know what? We have to own that. We, everybody in this room, we have to own that. And we have to be part of the solution. because part of it is benefit design, but of course the ACA did cap max out of pocket. The problem is that's about a quarter of the take home for a family. It isn't good. So we have to think about how we solve that problem.
I would just, I won't, I'll keep it short, but I do want to agree with it, and that is why I started the way I did, because I agree we all need to own a part of that, and I think that's a big reason why we as a sector are strongly behind the market shift to more value-based models and value-driven care. I think that's the right way for us all to own that together, and that's going to have an impact on us, and that should have an impact on formulary design as well.
Now, the other thing that's really important is that we're sitting here arguing about 5-FU insulin. That's a joke, man. We're talking about CAR-T. At least we should be talking about how we're going to pay for gene therapy for hemophilia. Because there is, well, shoot, I was in private practice for 20 years and I can't afford it. So I think these sort of nibbling around the edges kind of solutions, and frankly, that's a lot of what we heard today. Don't get me started on CAP.
That comes later. 10 minutes from now.
That is clearly nibbling around the edges. Listen, IPI and CAP is not a solution for gene therapy. I have to tell you guys, it doesn't solve gene therapy. And you know what?
You won't have to pay for gene therapy when you've killed the incentives for discovery.
Yeah, well, no, that's all right. Those dudes are going to be in market in a year. And this is about 2020 with the stuff about that. But I think the fact of the matter is that we need a solution that we can implement right away, and then we need a more global, long-term, overarching solution.
Great. Well, before we dive into step therapy and CAP and lots more, let's ground everybody. Now, most people in the audience probably know this, but to Deb, I think it's a good idea to just sort of talk about the mechanics of how we got to ASP plus 6 or now 4.3.
Right.
And what goes into that, and
Right.
you'll be made whole.
Yeah. So after hearing Senior Verma's good discussion over lunch, I think it's important to sort of reflect on how we got where we are today and what things we're doing to improve upon it. Since the inception of Medicare, drug pricing has been based on various different metrics, and really in 2005 began the ASP plus 6 model based on the Medicare Modernization Act. And really the movement toward the ASP plus 6 model was because there was general sentiment regarding the services that were provided and some of the risk provided with providing the drugs, that was sort of appropriate reimbursement. And since that time, that number has changed because it's not 6% anymore. With sequester, that's 4.3%, and there's a 3-month lag in terms of getting Medicare reimbursement similar to price. So you could say that that's about 3.3%. So just to level set, that's a smaller number than the ASP plus 6%. And you have a huge number of practices today that are trying to improve upon value to Medicare beneficiaries in the largest pilot that Medicare has ever launched in oncology, the Oncology Care Model pilot, which puts about 20% of Medicare beneficiaries. So I think 120-ish, 116 practices on the Oncology Care Model pilot to try to think about how we provide better value-based care. So, you have this historical precedent of a cost. During the time that prices have increased, tremendous innovation, and then you have the largest Medicare pilot today that you are implementing to try to improve value for this patient population. And just to call out, because I don't know how many of you touch those operations in practice, but, in my practice, this is, multiple millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars of investment in terms of reducing the total cost of care, because you're trying to manage high-risk patients better, you're navigating patients, you're having all patients have access to financial counseling, you're providing value-based pathways, doing assessment screening for these patients. And so to level set of where we are today, while drug prices are increasing at an unsustainable rate, we are participating
participating in solutions actively with tremendous administrative burden and tremendous expense to try to come up with better ways that we can be partners in that endeavor.
Now, it is very important to point out, and I don't know if anybody from government is still in the room, but there are no oncologists buying Teslas with the profit for Medicare patients. None. Zero. And Deb sort of understated the circuitous route by which we got to ASP plus 6, but I'm older than she is, so I remember. And here, I know I'm not looking for anybody to feel sorry for the commercial insurance companies, but all of you know that there's tremendous cost shifting going on to the commercial payers. And you may know that because you guys' premium, which is subsidized by your employer for the most part, everybody in this room, your premiums are going up a ridiculous amount. And the reason for that is because most commercial payers do not pay hospitals DRGs. There's some that do. Most of them pay percent of billed charges. Percent of billed charges based on a charge master, which most of us would consider akin to a letter to Santa Claus, literally. It's ASP plus, yes, but not ASP plus 4.3. It's ASP plus 200, or in the case of hospital systems, ASP plus 700. So, as we think about fixing Medicare, and I am agnostic, I could actually go out of the room as random else, but the truth of the matter is that to the extent that we make Medicare difficult for practices will be forced to respond, and commercial payers will be forced to either subsidize or respond. And if you don't believe this is a fragile system, you don't understand the system.
I think one of the hard things that, the Administrator Burkholder even used an important word in her remarks about perception. And I think that's one thing that is sort of lost into the interpretation around ASP plus 6 or 3 or 4 is what that applies to. There's been studies that have characterized this as a misalignment of incentives or an incentive for physicians to prescribe a more expensive medicine for their own personal gain. Maybe they're not that aggressive in those studies, but that's sort of the perception. I think if this were characterized in a way of ASP plus the cost of administering counseling, financial counseling, patient management, things that were very viewed as, and that may be what the funding goes toward, but I don't think that's well understood, so it leaves a question in people's minds whether, why is this a protected portion? And perception matters.
Yeah. Well, let me bounce off that. Sorry,
I have to say one thing. I know I'm going to use up all my time in the first 30 minutes.
No, it's all right.
But there are two things I think it's really important to be very clear. And one is that ASP is a system that is grounded in negotiation. It is grounded in competition. And that competition and negotiation, in fact, do happen. When I hear descriptions to the contrary, it sounds more like descriptions of the program that existed before average sales price, where it was a little bit more that the program was just a price taker. ASP guarantees that Medicare fee-for-service benefits from the discounts and rebates that are negotiated in the private market, and those in fact do occur. So that system does work in some important ways that I think we need to recognize, and I think that's reflected in the fact that the average volume-weighted average sales price historically has remained below inflation overall, so it is effective, but CMS itself says it's effective. They noticed that they reported their third quarter ASP files just a month ago, a couple months ago. That showed that for the top 50 Part B drugs, it's a really big portion of Part B spending, ASP went down by 0.8% for those 50 drugs in the last quarter, and they attributed that to a number of factors, including competitive market factors. So CMS itself is saying there are competitive market factors at work, helping us to control costs, balance those costs against good access and fee-for-service. I think it's really important for us to have that baseline as we talk about changes.
That's a great point, because I feel like it's sort of a misnomer that has been discussed, that Medicare is just a price taker in that way, because being the beneficiaries of average sales price by the very nature that it's an average of negotiated contracts, that it
allows Medicare to be beneficiaries of that negotiation that goes on in the market.
It also guarantees that those beneficiaries are paying cost sharing against a discounted price.
Great. Well, let me stick with this theme of perception. I think it's a good one coming out of our lunch. So we heard a lot about how the administration wants to support value-based transformation. Right now, there is this issue of best price, and what do you do with that? We'll leave that to the side for the moment. Is it the perception that the IPI and the framework of competitive acquisition under it, let alone the standalone, are those things in juxtaposition? Is it the right perception that with the IPI, as we heard, you're going to still get value-based transformation, whether it's in the market or in cancer care? And I'll let Randy.
I'm going to go forward.
I'll let Randy start.
No, I'll go
straight down.
You know, I think a value-based transformation in care is something we stand firmly behind. We have been hard at work on real reforms and concrete reforms that help us get there. Reforms to encourage more value-based contracts are just one example of that. Oncology, we're seeing a significant uptick in those, and we're hearing that payers are reporting that there is cost savings potential in those. So we're foursquare behind the transformation of our system to value. That's in part because our companies are in the business of delivering better value to patients in the system, and when we think the system and the market are genuinely oriented and organized around value, that'll work out okay for us. It won't always be perfect for everybody, but that's the direction we need to go. I think that there are a couple of basic foundational elements you need to have in place to really achieve that value-based transformation. And I think the alternative is as Mr. Grogan was saying, is to end up like Germany. He's right, we don't want to end up like Germany. But I think you need to strengthen market competition. You need to be equipping physicians and patients and consumers. You need to be looking at the innovation that we are on the cusp of as something that we should be harnessing to get better value and efficiency in our system rather than as a narrow siloed problem to be solved. I think when you have some of those ingredients, and when you're looking holistically at value across the system, again, not just looking at silos, I think when you have those ingredients in place, those are foundational elements to what a real value-based transformation of healthcare looks like that has the patient at the center of that equation. So does the IPI meet those? I'll leave it to others to decide.
Really quickly, but there should not be a question in the room about whether international price referencing is part of a pay-for-value system. The answer is no. And you can't value a medicine that doesn't exist because it doesn't make it to market, and you can't value a medicine that patients don't have access to because manufacturers like mine choose not to launch it. And those are real risks. That will happen here in the U.S., and that will certainly happen in the European countries where they've been referenced in that ADVI report or not. So as Deb already very acutely pointed out, we have multiple systems specifically dense in the cancer community in the United States who have already demonstrated substantial cost savings, substantial ability to impact and lower the unit price of cancer medicines. And to jump to a proposal that would put so much patient access and innovation at risk with international price referencing is borderline unethical.
Jeff, I don't know if you've had time to digest this proposal and talk about it with your members, but
well, it sort of, what I don't think has been broken down in some of the things, although the administrator mentioned some of them about how they're thinking about what this might translate to an individual level. I don't think that's necessarily apparent in some of the proposals, or how this would be implemented. It's sort of the goal of reducing costs by a third, I think, is a laudable one, but how to get there. I think from our vantage point, I would tend to agree. I think historically our research has shown that cancer drugs are available to U.S. patients first, and that's due to a variety of reasons, including things outside of payment, of course. Part of that being the regulatory environment, the launch strategies of companies, but along the lines of the launch strategies of companies, if the market shift, it's significant enough, and the motivation then lies to pursue markets overseas first, you will see that change. And so if we agree that U.S. patients having access to medicines first is a tenet that we want to see continue to the future, then that at least needs to be part of the discussion on how to maintain that.
Just to underscore, I'm sorry.
I have a couple of different concerns. And I think that there are a lot of details we have to be borne out, because in the proposed rule, or a notice of proposed rulemaking, sort of the details will be forthcoming next year, and the policy year after that to be implemented over 5 years. But I have a real concern about access to care for Medicare beneficiaries. I think that if you use a benchmark of reference pricing, if manufacturers don't come to the table and agree to those terms, are you going to have decreased access for Medicare beneficiaries? Are we going to have a decrease in innovation that results from this, that you won't have the newest, latest, greatest potential treatments available for Medicare beneficiaries? And while there's been a general description in former pilot a decade ago of the Competitive Acquisition Program, or Patt, it's unclear to me if that increasing administrative burden on practices, which as a practice there are decreased administrative burdens for Medicare beneficiaries today because you don't have all of the prior authorization to navigate. So if you increase the administrative burden and have this heightened complexity, are you going to have a shift in care for Medicare beneficiaries to a hospital site of service? Are you going to have decreased access to Medicare beneficiaries by the nature of that program? I think that those are big questions that I would have, because our system today of drug distribution and administration is so complex. To think that you're going to shift 50% of it in 5 years to this novel program that has increasing administrative burdens, I think that there are a lot of questions there that make me concerned about primarily access to care for Medicare beneficiaries and secondary to administrative burden.
Mike, you had a view last night about shifting the hospitals.
Yeah,
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
And the title of our panel is patients. And there are things patients like about the current system. They like the fact it's pretty convenient, it's pretty efficient. I like the price tag always. But they like their oncologist. Almost always. The patient satisfaction surveys for oncology services too. And given a system where the administrative burden is going to increase, and where at present a Medicare patient is, and I hate to put it in these terms because it makes me sound like a mercenary, but revenue neutral to the practice. If you make it unattractive to the community oncologist, they'll still be their doctors. They just won't give them chemotherapy. There's no law that says you have to get chemotherapy in your office. In fact, there are offices that don't get chemotherapy. Those patients will be sent to the hospital. Now we, I've been an oncologist for a long time. We've done this chicken little thing before. But if the hospital delivery system is required to absorb that volume of Medicare patients, we will have an access problem.
So I'll say we see some of these shifts today in primary care. As I've seen in my market, there's been a transition to a lot of concierge practices for primary care. And then the practices that are still accepting Medicare beneficiaries that have Medicare as their only payer, they have a certain quota that they won't see over that percentage. And so a lot of my patients that are Medicare beneficiaries, as an oncologist, obviously that's a lot of them, they are getting notices that they are terminated from their primary care practices. I will say that I think for some oncology practices, if you increase the administrative burden and you become too underwater for Medicare beneficiaries, that it may be hard to keep those patients in your practice or to infuse them in your practice. And today, as I see and treat patients, I'm payer agnostic as I see them. While some of their cost differences are variable by payer, I honestly don't know the payer when I'm seeing the patient. And I'm able to make decisions the same. You could foresee that if there are a lot of changes for primary Medicare beneficiaries, it's possible that could change over time. And I think that will not serve Medicare beneficiaries.
Mike, let me ask you a question. So you were at Debra, and you certainly didn't necessarily allow every drug to be used in the same way. You may have preferred some drugs over another. But we heard a lot today about how the system be like the commercial market. And you know the proposals, you've studied them over the last several months. Are those proposals like what you did at that?
Not
and what your colleagues do to do math?
Well, we did one thing. We had this thing called egregious builders. Those are the guys who get ASP plus 700. We just couldn't abide by that. So we capped them at 200. And then you could have heard the howling. Whew. What I did was two things. I'm a big fan of pathways. Those of you who know me, I've worked on clinical pathways for the last 10 or 12 years or so. We implemented a clinical pathways program. All those clinical pathways programs are they're built on an initial platform of optimal efficacy. The reason that's important is as we get into a universe, and this is wonderful to somebody who's been an oncologist for 25 years, a universe where the drugs actually work, amazing. Those are all on pathway. There are no pathways that don't have immunotherapy for first-line lung cancer. I know you guys know that, but I'm just saying. There are no pathways that don't have HER2-driven therapy first line. There are none. None, zero. I like pathways. And there are savings that we have from pathways. And it promotes evidence-based treatment. Wonderful. It also promotes clinical trials, because every pathways program says that if you go on a clinical trial, it's on pathway. The second thing we did, and as many people in this room know, I built an oncology medical home program at Aetna. It was the immediate precursor to the oncology care model. It was a total cost of care model. Now, that's not to say drugs are not important in the total cost of care. They are. But so are keeping people in the hospital, on the ER, and making sure you good end-of-life care and all that other stuff. The oncology care model, as currently being executed by CMMI, should this happen without some sort of provision for practices in the OCM, this will lead to the collapse of that program. There is no way they can coexist. It's impossible.
And just if you, I'll say to that, if you think about the spectrum of, if you have about 20% of Medicare beneficiaries on the OCM, and then, this is a 50% geography pilot, and then it's mandatory. There will, by its very nature, have to be overlap, which is challenging to the innovation that we're already committed to and already invested a tremendous amount of financial capital and sweat equity in trying to improve quality and value. So I think that's challenging, and in my opinion, these pilots, while they're important, need to be voluntary and pretty limited in order for us to learn as much as we can from the existing pilots that are out there, and then let's see what works.
And I just want to make sure people caught Dr. Patt's phrase, which was a 50% pilot. Now, to some that might sound a little bit like an oxymoron, but I think that was one thing that probably we all can agree with the CMS administrator on, was that this proposal is what she called a national scale overhaul of Medicare Part D. And like you may recall, the last time that happened, Congress was a little bit involved in it, and the idea that we are now essentially overhauling Medicare Part D reimbursement, not just for those 50%, but for the 50% of providers and their patients outside of the model as well, who will see their ASP fall, and that's going to drive more small practices to consolidate. The fact that we're doing that through CMMI seems a little bit of an overreach of administrative authority that might give us pause.
And I think that there are other ways in which we'd like to innovate in this space. So I know I've heard from manufacturers about value-based pricing. That I think they're excited about those pilots. I'll say I, with Mike, have worked on the U.S. Oncology pathways for over a decade. I've shared our breast cancer pathways for over a decade. And know that when I see a breast cancer patient or any cancer patient, I sit there and my health record, have a clinical decision support system, choose a therapy at point of care, give a patient a treatment care plan that talks about the drugs I'm going to give them, what I expect their response will be, what my goal of therapy is, what alternatives to treatment are. That all happens when I'm in the room with the patient, and
that's all innovation that's been born into investment in value-based care for, over 15 years now. That's great, and I'd love for pilots that incorporate those kinds of value-based initiatives to emerge, as I think that they really bring together cost and quality issues.
Now, let me be clear. I'm sure some of you in this audience who have gray hair like me find it more than slightly ironic that you might embrace pathways as a solution. Believe me, I can. But let's remember a couple of things. Number one, you always have your day in court, right? Present the evidence. The efficacy always wins. Number two, doctors make decisions. And I'm apolitical, remember, but I don't trust a lot in Washington, even though I work for Mark. I don't trust a lot in Washington. And when somebody says we're going to keep you whole, I would like that on a piece of paper and optimally notarized. Because that does not, so let's just be clear, because I'm going to tell you right now, keeping doctors whole in this model is just not going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's not. So they're going to calculate a management fee based on last year's pay, right? But the inflation year over year of that management fee will not be indexed to medical cost inflation or to the inflation related to novel therapies. It will not, which means over time, physicians will take a haircut. Now, I'm not telling you to be sorry for physicians, but let's be a little bit honest about what's going to happen, because that's what's going to happen. And I'm not a pony in this race. I don't know this, right? But it is a fact. And I can tell you it's a fact because it's been tried. Priority Health did it, medical home pilot, paid drugs and invoice. The drug spend went down, but the physician compensation went down even more.
So, I'll just jump in here. Sorry for the strong statement, Mike, but we know each other well enough to say that I think it's a bit insulting for the manufacturers in the room to say that we're not on board with pathways. I think we all got on board with that many years ago. And we understand the value of them from some of the space that you offer. And we believe in our products appropriately positioned on those pathways. So here's a couple things. You have to divide the opportunity to lower drug spending versus lower drug costs. And a lot of what we've talked about today is about lower drug spending. The administration doesn't seem to care about that, even though those of us in the room know that's the most important thing. And manufacturers have mechanisms where we can lower the cost per unit of our medicines. Deb pointed one out, and value-based agreements, although we're limited in how we can scale those with regards to how they affect best price, 340B prices, et cetera. And that's something that we're actively working with the administration to resolve. My company and many others in the room have approached CMS with various arrangements, including indication-based pricing. I'll give you an example that not only speaks to manufacturers' collaborative efforts to lower the price of our drugs, but speaks to dispel the myth that providers choose drugs based off of the financial margin that they gain. My company sells Cyramza. It's a drug that has multiple indications, one of which is in advanced colorectal cancer. And if you look at the clinical outcomes of our studies, they're parity with Avastin at 5 milligrams, but the cost of our drug is 2.5 to 3 times more than Avastin, and that's not because we chose to set our price that high. It's because the price migration issue is that drug had multiple indications. We've gone to CMS and said we'd love to cut it, but we can't cut it because it's going to affect our best price, and that's just not something that's sustainable for our company, and we've not been able to negotiate with them in a meaningful way. And I bring that up because, again, manufacturers do have a responsibility to figure out our own ways to reduce the cost of our drugs. And it also speaks to the fact that if providers were prescribing drugs based off the margin that they received them, well then correct. We would be selling a lot more Cyramza in colorectal cancer, but we're not, because that's not the logical decision if you have two drugs, one which in this case substantially reduced costs and have the same outcomes. So our provider partners appropriately choose Avastin 5 milligrams in that setting.
And that was data that came out from, I think, Exunda last month that reaffirmed that.
Great. Well, we have just a little bit of time left. I want to make sure we have time for questions. I hope there are some in the audience. I'm going to channel the Kardashians here and start with Randy. Find something to talk about the peak and the pit of these policies and how you view the
Yeah, well, I'll try to hit both, maybe something in between. Jacqueline, but you know, I think we have a little bit of a tale of two cities, I guess, and we as sector, as Jax was saying, really are committed to finding ways to be part of the solution and to support the movement to value. I think the commitment to value-based contracting and outcomes-based arrangements is just one demonstration of that. I think it's an important one because we really are demonstrating a commitment to stand behind the real-world performance of those products. So I think the administration has taken some important steps forward there. I think the reforms of the FDA rules around communications between manufacturers and healthcare professionals, basically they've taken major steps to solve one of the major barriers that is impeding the pursuit of more of those and more creative types of outcomes-based contracts. So I think we're hopeful we will continue to see more progress there on the price reporting and the anti-kickback barriers as well. So I think there are areas where we can see steps are being taken to really help to move the market, so the market and the competition are oriented around value to the patient today, but value for the patient tomorrow who's going to have unmet needs and needs a new treatment as well. And then I think we see some values like government price setting, which unarguably is moving in the opposite direction, as Jack said, and we look from the 2004 Department of Commerce report all the way up to this year's White House Council of Economic Advisors, there's no way to not conclude that that's going to have a very damaging impact on continued research and development of physician-administered medicines and by extension, patient outcomes over time. So I think I'm hearing something in the middle on the panel, actually, which is some smarter ways forward that are equipping patients and especially equipping physicians with tools, good evidence-based tools like sound clinical pathways or sound approaches to decision support that can be wrapped around more holistic incentives like a medical home that really can point the way forward in a way that everybody's doing their part, but we are actually organizing around doctors and patient care at the same time.
Mike?
So I agree with the outcomes-based pricing. I'm a huge fan of that approach, and I'm not a fool when I understand the challenges around ASP best prices. But I'm going to add a second one, and some people in this audience are not going to like it. You know what? You're going to lose the biosimilar battle. Just give in. And you just are. There's no universe in which you don't lose it. Embrace it. Throw them a bone. Because I understand that. In fact, a lot of companies make reference products, also make biosimilars in a different class. But the fact of the matter is this. There are still shenanigans going out there, and you know, we're adults, we can talk about that, and Gottlieb called out on it. So let's embrace it. Let's let the government believe that we are really in it. And I think at the end of the day, it will be the same outcome, except the president will tweet how he won that battle. He won't tweet about something else. So that's just my suggestion.
So, one, I do applaud the administration's effort actually to address drug pricing. I think that that's great. I think that it comes in many forms, though, not just as we think about the spend for Medicare beneficiaries. I think reforms in the 340B program around accountability and transparency, definition of a patient, would allow preservation of that program in a way in which it can be administered with its original intent. Because I think if manufacturers spend a high percentage of, sell a high percentage of their drugs at a cost discount, the natural consequence is they have to raise drug prices. I think that that program has to be held in check a little bit in order to decrease the rate of price increases. The same thing is true of PBMs. I think that that needs to have transparency in the direct and indirect remuneration fees. To have a decrease in total cost to the system. I think that the IPI and CAP is missing a lot of details, but is not what I would want to see move forward. I think what I would like to see move forward is something that's really limited and voluntary, with the ability to do other things like a clinical decision support architecture for pathways prescribing that both looks at evidence-based treatment algorithms in addition to incremental cost effectiveness and allowing patients to have improved health literacy as they engage in cancer care decisions especially. I'd like to see innovation come out of the manufacturer space, as I know there's willingness to do that. And I think that you can't have a cornucopia of pilots in all Medicare beneficiaries that, we need to really learn from these pilots. We need to learn from the OCM. We need to learn from pathways. We've already learned some. And so, these need to be limited and learn from them and then decide best ways to move forward. But I'm excited about the enthusiasm, and I think that what that is a shot across the bow and a call out that the administration is willing to act. And we need to be good partners and come to the administration with ways in which we can see solving some of these complicated problems that face us, which are born out of tremendous innovation and opportunity.
I certainly agree with that. I think, we're here because the status quo isn't optimal, and so we sort of have to take this opportunity. And I think many of us in the room today and well beyond will be interacting with HHS officials as they work through this, and I would only implore people to try and be creative with solutions. I think providing the evidence about perhaps where there may be unintended consequences or misunderstandings is fine, but to go out on a limb and actually think about alternative solutions, I think is more helpful. And we may not all agree with each other on what those should be, but to at least put them on the table and try and be creative is probably the only way that we're going to see our way forward. And to that end, I think it is really important not to have this be a conversation of how we could have better adjudicated the past, but to think about how it could be set up to better absorb the future. To Mike's point about how pathways are now allowing IO therapy in frontline lung cancer, that's a real market issue and a great opportunity for patients. And right now it's sort of easy to say, CAR-T are offering a creative new therapy or very innovative new medicine. But you can sort of overlook the problem right now because it's for rare indications. Well, the moment that something is approved, think of CAR-T in frontline lung cancer, for example, then you have an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think we're all better served to trying to think about how to do that looking into the future rather than solving the issues of the past.
So I'd echo the comments and say, at Lilly, we have really put our hands out to the administration and asked to come alongside some of these programs. And the peak, as you asked Mark, peak and PITS, the peak is what Deb said, is that we have an extremely engaged community, specifically in the cancer community, who's looking to find real solutions, not only to access, but also affordability and to preserve innovation. So I feel confident that we're going to be able to pursue some of these unique solutions that we've introduced today. On PIT's side, I think I've been pretty clear that international price referencing is as low as it gets, unless you consider direct negotiation with the government. And I want to be very clear that patients in the United States live longer and better lives than, unfortunately, cancer patients in European or emerging market countries. And the money that we spend as a system to ensure that in countless studies has been deemed worth it in whatever way that those algorithms have been designed. So if you go and ask any cancer patient or their family, and if I'm not talking about drug pricing, I'm trying to spend my time with the patient community, and if you go and talk to any of them about their experience with regards to cancer innovation, they're incredibly hopeful, and they are encouraged. And so I'm going to continue to embody that in my spirited conversations with many stakeholders, including government, in the hopes that we move forward with one of the more creative and less risky solutions on behalf of those families that I think we're all here looking to serve.
Well said. Great ending. Did folks in the room have any questions? So, if not, the panel members will be here after. All right. Thank you so much.